first half of the mile done. It's gonna be a long journey.
You know, life's a funny thing. Some of us are dealt some pretty cruddy cards, and then we're expected to just grow up, normal. That leaves a lot of us to struggle as we navigate through life's difficult times. And if you're anything like me, you have no idea what the hell normal is. Welcome to the Wishbone Podcast with me, your host, Strava Ohana, as we discuss and share our life stories in hopes of helping each other out. So if you got 30 minutes, let's talk about it. I'm back. I know it's been a long time, and sorry for the long wait, but there's been some updates in my life and some things that have happened that I needed to take a break. I actually took a break from both channels and really just focused on my inner head, my inner space, and my personal life. So last year was a very, very difficult time for me. I would say in my adult life, it's definitely one of the hardest years I've had. My ex and I, it's been very, very difficult. I haven't been happy at work. I haven't been happy in my personal life. And part of the reason why I created the podcast was a way to vent these feelings and to kind of find catharsis and a way to kind of circumvent the fact that it's so difficult to find therapy here on the island. And it definitely was helpful, and it continues to be helpful. It allowed me to have conversations with my sister that I didn't necessarily think I could or even thought of having. But I will say it was so difficult, and I think you can tell in those episodes, it was so difficult for me to sit in front of a camera and really just focus on the negative of my life and kind of make that the center point of my show. And so it was very difficult, and I couldn't see myself continuing to do that. Now, I know we had some talks about having a interview with my cousin in her life, and she's going through quite a bit right now, so she actually withdrew, and she's not ready for the interview right now. However, she has given me her blessing to talk about her story and kind of the news stories that were out about the time that my aunt was arrested and her eventual death and whatnot. But and that is coming. But I really wanted to create a show. This was from the genesis of the idea. Create a show that focused on perseverance, and even though we suffer, what we can get out of suffering. And so I find it much easier for me to talk about positive things and then reflect on some of the negative things that allowed me to get to this space. And so this is much easier for me to do. It's not so much just poor pity me, which may or may not have been what was presented or came across, but I have a much easier time with this format. So be ready for that. There have been some interesting things that have happened. So a month now has gone by, and since I created this goal for myself, and it's going to be very interesting to see how this progresses. But 4 weeks ago, I was celebrating my 39th birthday, and it got me thinking about this hunting trip I was on several years ago. I can't remember if it was before or after I broke my back. But the reason I bring that up is because if it was after I broke my back, then I pretty much was a badass, to be honest. If it was before my back, I'm not sure if I'm in that same shape. So basically, I was on this hunting trip with a great group of guys, and one of the guys had shot a really, really nice kind of awesome buck, and I ended up carrying a hind quarter out on my back, about 240 pounds, all the way back to the car. And a lot of the older guys were like, you know what, young blood, just wait till you're our age, then you're not going to be able to do this. And I find myself thinking about next year being 40, and I'll be their age, and I am not in that shape. I'm not in the shape that I want to be. I'm not physically or mentally in the shape that I want to be. This past year has been really, really a heavy year, for sure. I mean, at work, it's been dismal. My personal life, as far as, some financial battles and whatnot, has been dismal. The ex and I are just kind of basically in court all the time, and it's just been very, very difficult. And my boys are starting to get to the teenage years, and it's very difficult for me to kind of navigate this space because they go from these people that want to be in your life every second of the day to like one word answers. And I don't know how to navigate this space. And I'm trying. We do talk, and I do take them out, and we have talks, and they reassure me that they're just teenagers and there's nothing really going on. You know, they don't hate me like my inner dialogue is screaming at me that that's the case. So that part is going pretty well. But anyway, I knew I needed something, a midlife crisis, if you want to call it, but I needed something to kind of reset my whole mindset. I found myself, focusing more on the negative, kind of holding on to the anger. It wasn't the perspective that I have loved, that it wasn't the perspective that I've always had in my life, where you look at the positive and you think, I'm happy to be here. We're going to make it. It was more like I just was falling into this mindset that I didn't like, I didn't want, and I knew I needed a reset. And the best reset that I know of is to suffer. Again, I really feel like there's a lot of benefit to suffering. Suffering kind of gives you a different perspective and paradigm on life, and that's what I needed. So, long story short, I challenged myself that next year on my 40th birthday, I would run 40 miles during my birthday week. So that is roughly 6 miles a day. And then I would run my birth year in miles, so 1,985 miles by the end of 2025. And I thought this was an amazing goal. I think it's going to be fantastic. Now, I am a runner. I did cross country in high school, even through college. I used to run all the time. I used to run 5 miles every morning typically. And then we got heavily into calisthenics. And then, life happens. My boys got older. Management duties at work kind of took over. Blah, blah, blah. Excuse. And here we are now. So I found myself drinking really, really heavily, trying to really run away from whatever issues and stress that I was going through. It got bad enough that on my mom's birthday last year, I decided to, actually, on my mom's death anniversary, I decided to stop drinking. So I had gotten some pretty bad medical news, and the doctor basically told me that I needed to stop drinking. Initially, he thought the test was wrong. There's no way that these values were so out of whack. I retested, and sure enough, they came back the exact same. And he was like, damn, maybe you should stop drinking. And so I stopped drinking. That lasted about 8 months. And while I wasn't running away from my problems anymore through substance abuse, I was still struggling, with this new perspective that I had that was very dismal, very tunnel visioned. And so I did start drinking again. The doctor told me, you know what, it isn't actually necessarily based on the alcohol consumption. You being an OI patient, your liver produces a lot of these values because of the OI. So he put me on some medication to help lower my blood pressure and to lower my cholesterol. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, like I am not as fit as I think I am. So this running goal to me was perfect. It was going to challenge me. It was going to put me through the ringer and hopefully get me to that perspective reset that I'm looking for. And so I'm telling people at work and kind of just sharing my new goal. And one of my friends was like, you know what? 40 miles in a week is kind of weak. Like maybe you should do 40 miles in a day. And he might have been saying it jokingly, but I was like, no, that's crazy. Okay, I'll do it. And so now it's switched from 40 miles in a week to 40 miles in a day. Those of you guys who know Kauai, the Kalala Lookout is a very famous lookout at the top of Waimea Canyon. And I'm going to be running with my hands on the rail, starting off there, the 18 miles down the canyon, which is all downhill. And we'll talk about kind of the concerns I have. And then another 22 miles to my home. And that will be really my first ultra. I've done 2 normal marathons when I was much younger, and they kicked my butt. I did them in 6 hours, I believe. I have a hard time remembering, but it wasn't a very good time, but it definitely kicked my butt. So that's the new direction. I want to kind of talk about my journey and my goal on this running journey to some ultras and talk about how my life has brought me to this point. And I would love to continue doing interviews and whatnot, talking to different people and their perspectives and their background, and maybe really make it kind of fitness based, maybe perhaps. But by far, I am not a fitness expert or anything like that. But I do think that running is accessible to anybody. And I have to give a shout out to my brother Mike. He showed me a YouTuber that took him, this YouTuber took about 12 years to run a sub 3 hour marathon, which to me is just mind boggling. But running is accessible to anybody. And so with that being said, even though I have OI, even though I'm suffering this injury from last year, which we'll talk about, we're going to do it. So it's going to be very exciting. I really am really happy to kind of bring this show back on in this new format. And we'll go from there. But I will say what's interesting is I was telling my dad that I'm going to be running, and he was saying things like, he wishes he was here to run with me. But growing up, he was always a runner. I remember him telling me he was called Gazelle as a kid, as a nickname. And he would run in like loafers. He would run in business shoes. He would run in all kinds of things, but he would run. He was always a runner. And I remember a few times running with him, and then he would just kind of kick it into high gear and just leave me way behind. But I never took it like a bad thing. I just always remembered him flying away from me just superhumanly fast, and thinking, yeah, Dad, I get it. That's awesome. And so that was something that it was kind of cool to kind of touch back on with my dad, knowing that we have this kind of tumultuous past. But it was very, very cool to touch back on that. So moving on, we are going to be talking about this run. So after Mike sent me this video, my research really started to open up into what's called Zone 2 running. And I had never heard of Zone 2 running. Basically I'd never heard of it. And so I kind of fell down the rabbit hole, and I fell deep. And Zone 2 running isn't a new thing. It's actually an old school thing that a lot of people are starting to realize the benefits of what this old school thought was. So there's this doctor out there, Inigo San Milan. He kind of really popularized the idea and kind of cemented in the science behind Zone 2 running. And essentially, now again, I'm not an expert, but I'm very, very jazzed about this whole thing. And I can definitely see where my deficits have been underlined due to me not doing this type of training. So for those who don't know, Zone 2 running is basically, it depends on your heart rate, okay? So depending on who you talk to or what discipline of exercise you're in, whether it's cycling or running or whatever the case is, you can have as many as 3 zones to as many as 6 zones, or 7 zones, 11 zones. But typically there's 6 zones. So your first zone is your just normal heart rate, pretty much your just standard baseline if you're not doing much. Zone 2 is about 60 to 70% of your max heart rate. Zone 3 is 70 to 80, Zone 4 is 80 to 90, and Zone 5 is 90 to max heart rate. And so there's several ways to get max heart rate. We're going to be talking more about these things, but typically what you do is you'd go to a lab and they would test you. They would get your lactate levels, and they'd also get your threshold levels and different things like this to really kind of dial in what your max heart rate is and what your different zones are. Another thing you can do is run a really, really hard 5K, and the last 3Ks you're just going to average your heart rates and then put it into this website, which we'll talk about. They've done the algorithm that breaks it down, and that's a lot more accurate than the last method. And the last method, which some people say it gets pretty close, some people say it's just a stupid idea, no one really knows, so take it with a grain of salt. But you can take 220 minus your age and then times it by the different zones. So 50 to 60 would be 0.5, 0.6. You could times that number by 60 to 70, 0.6, 0.7, and that would get you a rough idea. And then so there's so many benefits to Zone 2 running. It's really what's called your aerobic base. It really develops your endurance fitness. It develops a lot of the slow twitch muscle fibers, which is so interesting. Anything above Zone 2, you're actually working on fast twitch muscles for the most part. Fast twitch muscles use your glycogen, your carbs as a fuel source, and as a result, they produce a lot of lactate. Lactate can help or can produce a lot of cramps, and actually has to slow you down if you hit your lactate threshold. If your body's not able to get rid of lactate, then you actually have to slow down in order for your body to get rid of it. It actually inhibits your body's movement. Slow twitch muscle, on the other hand, is the only muscle that actually uses lactate as a fuel source and can flush your system of it. So you need a lot of slow twitch muscle in balance with your fast twitch to help you get rid of lactate. Now, anyone who's an OI person can suffer from muscle cramps that are debilitating. It is the worst pain I've ever been in my life, like full-on body sweat. It feels like it's going to rip my leg in half. The idea of being able to handle these cramps better is a game changer for me. Like, I'm on board 100% right away. It also helps that your aerobic stage is where you're burning fat. In your aerobic stage, they use fat as a fuel source. Your mitochondria do. And when you're training in the aerobic zone, it actually helps build more mitochondria. It makes it more efficient, and it makes burning fat much more efficient in this system, which is crazy. It's amazing. When you get into these higher fast twitch needs and these higher zones, they're going to use glycogen, which is essentially carbs, because it's a much easier fuel source. And so the higher fast twitch demands are going to use an easier source, and then the result is lactate. So again, I might have gotten some things a little mixed up there. It is very, very cool science. We'll get into it more as we progress through this, but week 1 is very exciting, very daunting. The idea of running 40 miles is kind of nerve-wracking for sure. I'm very, very nervous. I was talking to another friend, and they said, you're not only taking on the challenge, you're taking on a whole new lifestyle, and that kind of really brought it home for me. I'm going to be adopting a whole lifestyle. Like, I'm going to have to stop. I'm going to have to start training much more intensely, or at least dedicate my life to this if I want to see it through. And I've always enjoyed running, and so I'm very excited yet scared about the idea of doing this. You know, when I was running a lot, I just enjoyed the freedom. I loved it. I never found myself hindered. But as I got older and started to run less, then, of course, the effects of, an unathletic approach to things was starting to compound, and running became a chore. It wasn't this freedom anymore. It was this struggle. And one thing I've really, really noticed is that I really feel that I've depleted my aerobic base. So when I was cross country, or any kind of mentality that was driven into my head to be a better runner, was always in the sense of either beating your time, so faster, or beating your distance. And it was always the case of, if you want to be a faster runner, run faster. However, aerobic zone 2 training starts out with complete humbleness. Like, you have to let go of ego, because you have to stay in this certain zone. You have to stay in your zone 2 heart rate, otherwise you're not getting the benefits. And I really feel like I depleted my zone 2, because any time I try to run just a little bit, my heart rate jacks up. Now, I can run really fast. My fastest mile, and I'm sure I can improve on this, was just a little over 6 minutes a mile. That's great to me. I feel like that was pretty fast. And when I would cross country run, same thing. I would run, like a 50-minute 5 mile, which is great. I think that long term, that's good. I mean, I don't remember my exact times, but obviously these things are going to improve. But with that being said, you have to stay in this heart zone. And so, knowing me, I am very egotistical. I know I'm going to push myself. So with that being said, I want to do this right. I want to go by the numbers and let the numbers dictate how and when I go and do these different things. So my very first goal, honestly, will be to run the 40 miles in a day, right? Which is mind-blowing. And then eventually I would like to run from Kalala Lookout to Ke'e Beach, which is the end of the road. So there's on the map, you'll see here there's a 16-mile gap between Kalala Lookout and Ke'e Beach, but that's a very rugged 16 miles, by the way. It's life threatening. It's tons of tall cliffs and whatnot. I want to run the 79 miles the other way around. So Kauai is not very big, and I want to run from Kalala Lookout all the way to Ke'e Beach, which is 79 miles. So that's my next goal. And then I want to do a 100-mile ultra, and eventually maybe even a sub 3-hour marathon. I don't know how plausible that is, but it's nice that I can set goals. It's nice that in this kind of pursuit of catharsis, that I don't have to hit a goal and be done with it. Basically, running is one of those things that you can hit a goal and you're not done yet. You could always chase the next goal and be better, and it's not something that you can stop doing and pick back up easily. If you stop doing it for even a little bit of time, maybe even a month or two, you have more work to get back up. Like, you have to earn those miles back. You have to earn those times back. And so with that being said, that's what we're going to be doing on this show. I just wanted to let you guys know that's where we're going to be going with it. And we'll be doing weekly follow-ups, kind of see how the progress is going. And I just appreciate you guys following me on this journey. And if any of you want to run with me, for sure, look me up on Strava, Luca Ohana. I would love it if you did. We kind of have a really cool organic movement going on at work, where I have people who are coming out of the woodwork saying, hey, one guy shattered his leg and he's starting to run again after 5 years. I have some other people who are starting to run, and it's been very, very cool. And I just enjoy this movement, this progress. So join me along and tell me what you think. And otherwise, we'll see you guys out on the trails.
Well, that's it, folks. Thanks for stopping by. Make sure to check out the show notes. As always, let's give them something to smile about, and we'll see you guys next week.